Hello and welcome back. I hope that you and your families are safe and healthy today during this unprecedented time. I'm Stephen Crine, President and CEO of the Canadian Employee Relocation Council, and I'll help moderate the discussions today as we review the fundamentals of relocation in this very popular program, RELO 101. The program is an exceptional opportunity to learn more about the industry, its various components, terminologies, and complexities. As we noted last week, this is a very trying time for all of us, and most importantly for our families and employees. And the importance of an employer's duty of care has never been greater than it is at this time. There's no playbook for the events that are coming at us on a daily basis, and our speakers today will give you some helpful tips that I think will help you navigate some of those challenges. The situation is changing rapidly with COVID, and here at CERC, we're doing our very best to keep you updated. Part of that includes our COVID resources page, which provides you with an opportunity to share experiences, helpful tools, articles that you may have prepared or come across. There are also links to government resources, public health, immigration, tax issues, etc., that are updated on a regular basis. So thank you for being with us today. I'm pleased to welcome our panel of experts back, and I'll introduce our presenters in a few minutes. A couple of housekeeping items. As always, the event will end promptly at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We've allowed a 15-minute Q&A at the end of the session, and you can ask questions throughout the session using the chat feature on the right of your screen. We'll be gathering those questions as we go through today's webinar. In the event that we don't get to all of the questions, we will issue a supplementary update following the session. You should have received an email with a link to the slide deck for today's presentation, and if you need any assistance at all, call the help number on your screen or use the chat feature on the right-hand side of the screen. 2 continuing ed credits will be issued for those of you holding the CERC Professional Designation program. I would like to say thank you to our colleagues at Weichert for their continued generous support in providing the delivery platform and assistance in coordinating these webinars. That is the page that I was referencing. It's on the CERC. You can access it on the home page of the CERC website. And we've recently entered into an agreement with Seneca College for the delivery of the program. And as we explained last week, there are 3 levels to the program. The next intake is May the 12th. Level 1, upon successful completion of level 1, you'll receive the Canadian Employee Relocation Specialist designation. Level 2 is the Canadian Employee Relocation Professional designation, and level 3 is the Canadian Global Mobility Professional. So, to today's presentation, there's no doubt that the complexities involved in moving employees are on the increase, and with the onset of COVID, those complexities have multiplied. So it's vitally important that companies have the best programs and policies in place to manage their global mobility programs. As we look at cross-border relocation policy, let's just take a moment to put that into perspective about how important this aspect of mobility is to both the U.S. and Canadian economies. In a normal day, and these are not normal times, but in a normal day, over $2 billion in trade and services pass between the United States and Canada. So at the end of today's webinar, that accounts for about $85 million. The combined annual trade and investment between our 2 countries amounts to almost $1.5 trillion per year. From an employment perspective, U.S. exports to Canada support some 8 million U.S. jobs, while about 2.5 million Canadian jobs, or 14% of our workforce, are dependent on Canadian exports to the US. Canada is the United States' largest customer, and over 400,000 people cross the border every day. Employee mobility between our two countries is vitally important to support that trade. In 2018, the last year for which statistics are available from the government, business visitors accounted for 1 million visits. And so to our presenters today, we have a terrific panel who have been presenting RELO 101 at the CERC annual conference and CERC webinars over the past several years. There we go. I can see it's a little slow today to move the slides, so hopefully we get through that. Our presenters today, Cindy Mulhall, SCGMP. She's an advisor of workforce mobility with Suncor Energy. She's also a distance learning instructor for Seneca College. Lisa Hewlett is also SGCMP and GMS. She is the VP of Business Development with Server Relocation Canada. And Tricia Cochran, CRP, GMS, SGCMP. Too many credentials in here. She's a relocation management consultant, and she's also a distance learning instructor with Seneca College. I introduced each of our speakers fully last week with a complete review of their bios. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Tricia Cochran, if I may. Tricia, over to you, and welcome, ladies. I'm looking forward to another great session this afternoon.
Thanks so much, Steve, and welcome back, everybody. Cross-border relocations are divided into two types: permanent, which is a move that is one way and indefinite in duration, and temporary, which is an assignment that is for a defined period of time with an expectation of return to a home location, which may be short or long-term. Cross-border activity is most commonly associated with those levels of employees that are managers, technical, professional, and skilled employees, trade employees, and finally executives in that order. So when asked to identify how important mobility programs are to supporting specific initiatives within organizations, they provided the following feedback. And in order of importance, they indicated that it was for business and project needs, for talent acquisition, and for employee development and employee retention. So as we did last week, we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on cross-border programs in this period of time. And as we discussed last week, we're seeing many associations postponing relocations to impacted locations, or in fact from impacted locations. The Canada-US border remains closed to all non-essential travel. There are differences, of course, in how Canada and the US are managing COVID-19. And in-process relocations are being managed on a case-by-case basis. There's also additional support being provided for in-process relocations. And President Trump is expanding on his pledge to halt immigration to the US in response to the COVID-19 crisis. He now says that his forthcoming executive order will last 60 days and only apply to people seeking green cards. An administration official said that the order was addressing only green cards because dealing with temporary work visa restrictions would be much more complicated. In many of those currently in the US on work visas, they're actually there in industries like food processing and healthcare, which are of course directly related to the pandemic. And Trump says he will probably sign the order today, and it could be renewed after the 60-day period expires. So when it's not domestic, cross-border moves create a myriad of issues that are not necessarily part of a domestic move. You can see from the list that there are many, many issues that we have to concern ourselves with. Probably primarily right now, visa and immigration is the most daunting of those issues, and the rest fall in order. There are also issues regarding health and medical, insurance, be it home, auto, or health, Social Security versus social insurance, banking and credit challenges, exchange rates when the dollar is significantly different. Languages, if moving as an example from a French-speaking province to United States can be a challenge for some employees. So there's just some of the things that make up the cross-border moves a little bit more stressful. Things such as work environment, business practices, attitudes, beliefs, customs. You'd be surprised how disruptive it can be when people are moving to a new country and things, different, like Thanksgiving occurs at a different time, and it can be a little bit stressful for employees who are in a new country. We're going to talk a little bit about policy implications now, and cross-border moves really should include the benefits that are given to employees relocating domestically and more. Most of the actual benefits for employees moving within Canada are, in fact, similar to benefits offered within the United States. The most important differences are not so much the benefits themselves, but the local customs, the processes, and the tax treatment of expenses. The CERC 2019 Relocation Policy Survey noted the following changes made by participating organizations to their cross-border policies. 50% increased household goods benefit, while the other 50% decreased them. 50% added or increased house hunting assistance, and 50% added or increased miscellaneous relocation allowances, while 25% decreased them. 50% added or increased spouse partner assistance, and 50% added or increased cost of living assistance, and 50% increased tax counseling benefits, which is a huge benefit for employees dealing with cross-border moves. More organizations use a global relocation policy to manage cross-border relocations than a specific cross-border policy for activity between Canada and the US. And 72% of organizations with cross-border relocations use a global policy to manage such relocations, and only 28% have one or more policies specific to Canada-US activity. Cross-border travelers. The business traveler is often referred to as an accidental expat, and it's becoming more and more of a concern, especially with recent changes to US tax laws and foreign bank account reporting requirements. Companies and employees who have frequent travel between Canada and the US need to consider, A, if they meet the threshold for dual tax reporting, B, if the travel will have an impact on the individual or the company for transfer pricing, personal tax implications, or assume potential fines for non-compliance, and if they will be covered under their own healthcare plan if they become ill or injured while out of the country. Many companies have developed a web application which companies and employees can use to track their travel days and therefore monitor if they're approaching a threshold which will impact them. This enables the company and the employees to address the concerns by canceling further travel if the employee happens to be getting close to that threshold, and they can be appropriately prepared to report taxes if they need to. Now we're going to go to our first poll question. So what issues apply to cross-border relocations that do not apply to domestic moves? Are they home sale, home purchase, and the shipments of goods? Are they terms, eligibility, and benefits? Or are they immigration, tax, social security, and social insurance?
Okay, we have a lot of people responding to our poll. We'll give it answers coming in real quick on this one.
Fast and furious, just the way we like it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Laura.
Sure. I'll give it just a few more seconds here. People a chance to weigh in. All right, looks like that's where we're going to be. So let me close this poll and share it. And there are your responses.
Look at that. Perfect. All right, on to the next. The immigration, tax, social security are the biggest challenges, that's for sure. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about, sorry, I just have to be able to move this forward. It's not moving forward for some reason. Whoop, there we go, okay. The top 4 challenges in managing our cross-border relocations, as per the CERC 2019 survey, were tax, visa and immigration, family concerns, and housing. The tax is a daunting thing. There's a lot of taxes that are incurred when we're moving between Canada and the United States. And if a company is not sufficiently supporting their employee in terms of tax gross-ups, that can become a very large tax liability for the employee that is considering a relocation. Visa and immigration, as we can tell right now, borders are not exactly flowing as smoothly as they once did, and family concerns as well as housing. Now we want to look a little bit about why employees would decline cross-border moves. And interestingly enough, while family issues top the list of why employees decline relocations, many organizations do not outline any specific support for accompanying children that may have cognitive disabilities or challenges. And many families are silent on special needs for children. And since it's often not addressed in policy, many employees may feel that there's a stigma, so they err on the side of non-disclosure. And I was recently on a webinar where learning specialists were indicating that this was an issue that was quite rampant, and often families end up in a destination country, and it is then that they're seeking additional help from their employers. And then secondly, spouse career challenges. So in days past, when a family was asked to move, they simply up and went, and there was one primary breadwinner and not a lot to worry about. So today's families often see dual career families, and not all people are willing to put a career on hold while being relocated to a country where they may or may not be able to work. Compensation concerns are also high on the list, as moving to higher cost areas is a real concern for many employees. And immigration, again, is a key concern. 68% of survey participants on the CERC 2019 survey reported that they would support permanent residency in cross-border situations only if required by the organization. And another 5% might support permanent residency if requested by the employee. And 28% confirm that handling such situations would be handled on a case-by-case basis. So some interesting statistics there to think about when we think about employees that are declining work or potential career moves. So again, we're going to talk about tax. One of the biggest things in cross-border relocations is tax. And for US policies, virtually all reimbursements are considered to be taxable. Now, in late 2017, there was a major change to US tax legislation, which shifted several key items formerly not considered to be non-taxable into a taxable state. While in Canada, reimbursements must be directly related to an expense that's incurred as a result of the relocation, and expense reimbursements are generally not considered to be taxable income, with the exception of financial assistance for the new location purchase and or loss on sale. And in the US, expense reimbursements are all considered to be taxable income. So from this grid we see here, the taxes and deductibility. So you can see the changes from the prior law. So where we had exclusion for an employer providing moving expenses reimbursement, any qualified moving expenses that were reimbursed by the employer were not to be included in compensation, but due to the new Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that's been suspended until 2026, and reimbursements are thereby taxable. And moving expenses deductions in the prior law, where qualified moving expenses were paid by the taxpayer and were allowed to be deducted even if the taxpayer did not itemize, again, all suspended until 2026, and any expenses are no longer considered to be deductible. So those are significant changes, and also significant additional costs for those employers that provide tax gross-ups for the employees to cover these additional expenses for them. And now we are going to talk a little bit about specifically taxability as it relates to home sale. Because home sale expenses are generally not considered to be income in Canada, Canadian policies do not have to follow what's known as the 11-step process, as they do in the US. However, US companies must take on the risk of the sale once the contracts have been signed, and there must be two separate transactions, the employee to the company and then the company to the buyer. And Lisa is going to walk us through the 11-step process, buyer value option steps, as well as discussion on household goods. Over to you, Lisa.
So the 11-step process, thank you, Tricia, by the way, great job. The 11-step process was put in place by the IRS, and it must be followed. And if it is not followed, then employees and the company can be charged a lot of money as a penalty. So within the 11-step process, there must be an exclusion clause. Employees cannot accept money directly for the home sale, or the employees cannot sign the offer. The employee enters into a binding contract with his or her employer or the relocation service company, such as Serva or Weichert. Once the contract is executed, all the burdens and the benefits must pass to the purchaser. So the employee is no longer in the picture. The contract of sale between the employee and the purchase is unconditional. Neither the employee nor the employer, in the case of a relocation company transaction, exercises any discretion over the subsequent sale of the home by the purchaser. So once the employee has signed off and they've sold it to their company or to the relocation management company, they no longer have any say as to what that subsequent sale is to an eventual purchaser. A purchaser enters into a separate listing agreement, and that's known as the double deed, enters into a separate listing agreement with a real estate broker for resale. The purchaser enters into a separate agreement to sell the home to a buyer. The purchaser arranges for the transfer of title to the buyer, and the purchase price eventually paid by the buyer has no effect on the purchase price paid to the employee. So those are two separate things. So the employee sells their home to, in this case, we'll say a relocation management company. End of deal, they're paid out. Then the relocation management company is then trying to get the home sold, and they find there's a buyer. The buyer executes the deal with the relocation management company, not the original owner, and it's a separate agreement. And certainly, if any of you have questions on the 11-step process, all three of us love to talk about it, and we'd be pleased to go into more detail with you. And then one of the most common programs in the United States is called the Buyer Value Option Program. It allows the employee to achieve a market competitive price on their home by securing an outside buyer. So the employee finds the buyer. It focuses on aggressive home marketing to produce the employee-generated sales. But there is no guaranteed offer. So it is on the employee to sell their home. The BVO program is a creative alternative to guaranteed offer programs, and it is ideal for employee direct reimbursement or tiered benefit plans. So the key here is there is no buyout. But by doing it this way, they still achieve the issue of the 11-step process and the IRS recognizes that, and that's key. So poll question number 2. What is the one key way to avoid tax on a cross-border corporate relocation home sale? Number 1, discuss options with your tax provider. Number 2, ensure the 11-step process is followed to the letter. 3, engage a realtor who has experience in Canada and the US. Over to you, Laura.
Okay, let's get this poll launched. right, we've got a lot of people responding. Everybody loves the polling today. That's great. Nothing like a good poll. Okay, we're closing in on 30 seconds. It looks like we've got all of our voting in. So I am going to close this and share it with the group. Here we go.
Oh my goodness, look how brilliant you all are. Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Laura. All right, so next we're going to talk about cross-border moving household goods. And if you recall from last week, we spoke about the importance of finding and utilizing a qualified mover, a mover that belongs to a van line, that has backing of a van line, that has quality scores they must follow, and that sort of thing. So for cross-border moves, exponentially, it is even more important to use a qualified mover, particularly one that is experienced in cross-border moving. And as we go through the next few slides, you'll see that there are a myriad of details that must be followed in order to successfully do a household goods border move. So according to the 2019 CIRC survey, and it's interesting, we're seeing some differences between 2017 and 19. Packing, unpacking. In 2019, 100% of participants said that they are providing and covering those expenses. Replacement value protection, as we spoke about last week, that is when something has happened within the move, there's been some damage, and it's the valuation protection, and that has gone down since 2017. Special crating, and that's for some of the high-end products or things that need special packing, etc. That's also gone down. Reassembly has gone up. Storage in transit, interestingly, is being covered, and that's gone up significantly in 2019. Pet shipment has also gone up, whereas long-term storage has reduced significantly. And then loss on sale for the auto, that has gone down from 2017. And I'm going to go to the next one. So COVID-19 and household goods. Certainly cross-border moving has been severely impacted by COVID-19. As Tricia indicated on her slide, the US-Canada border is currently closed except to non-essential traffic. Well, moving services has been considered essential, but the scrutiny of trucks crossing the borders each way has multiplied exponentially. In Canada, we have a Quarantine Act, so anyone entering Canada must quarantine for 14 days. And the regulations require all clients, so all transferees, to have another party clear Canada Customs on their behalf with a power of attorney form. So this is all, again, as part of COVID-19. It can be a friend, a family member, a colleague, or a realtor on their behalf to clear customs. And if that isn't possible, the mover is required to bring the goods to storage until the client has completed the 14-day quarantine and is able to clear Canada Customs. So that impacts cost to the actual move. And of course, as Tricia spoke about earlier, President Trump has issued the 60-day executive order, and I apologize, shouldn't say 120 days. I did this a few days ago, as things are changing daily. But that is going to have an impact on some of the relocations going to the United States and some that are already in the United States coming back to Canada. So we're going to have to stay tuned. I'm sure things will change next week on that. So according to the 2019 CIRC survey for cross-border moves, again, interesting to find out how many companies have household goods service arrangements. And if you recall last week, we spoke about that. Some companies just tell their employees, go get 3 quotes from a mover. I would call that ad hoc. Others have a contract with a carrier. Some have contracts with multiple carriers, and others outsource that move management piece to a relocation management company. So as you can see by the numbers, one carrier, 16%, multiple carriers, 16%. The large majority of firms in Canada outsource move management to a relocation management company at 56%. And then there are the others, ad hoc, at 12% that just say, go get three quotes. Which scares me to be honest, say, go get three quotes, because everything about crossing the border is all about documentation and using a mover that knows what they're doing. So for cross-border moves, there are some different terms that we hear about. It's northbound and southbound, and then you've got to the USA, and Hawaii and sometimes Alaska are typically handled like they're overseas moving. The majority of household lading bills are paid in US dollars. US regulations no longer allow common industry tariffs, although each van line or mover's unique pricing schedules today are similar. So it used to be in the United States that there were certain moving tariffs and everybody operated from that. And now things are different, although it still seems very similar. There are major security and customs restrictions. And every time we hear about someone's goods being held up at the border, it's because the documentation was not done properly. They're missing papers. And again, one of the reasons that we recommend using a qualified cross-border mover is they will advise your transferee on the correct documentation to prepare. They will assist the transferee or assignee in preparing those documents, and they must be done to they must be perfect when you get to the border. Strict compliance with US and Canada laws around permissible goods and proper paperwork is key to a smooth border crossing. All of us hate getting those calls saying somebody's goods are held up at the border. So if you learn anything from this, please use a qualified mover. And poll question number 3. Oops, I'm sorry, Laura, I have to go back. There, thank you. I'm sorry. Poll question number 3. What currency are cross-border moves typically charged in? 1, Canadian dollars. 2, US dollars. 3, it depends on the departure country. And over to you, Laura.
Now, everybody seems to want to answer this one. This is a good one. Quick answers coming in. All right, I think we can close this one out a little quicker because everybody's got their votes coming in. Okay, couple more seconds. And I think we're good. Here we go. Let's see what we got. Survey says.
Yeah, the correct answer is US dollars. I would say, and I would say to my colleagues on the phone, in my experience, I've never really seen a cross-border moving invoice in anything but US dollars. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to go over the cost example, and as you'll see from the last session, I've continued with the same family dynamics just for ease of comparison purposes. So the only difference is that they're moving from Calgary to Houston. Okay, I'm having trouble advancing the slides, Laura. Okay, so the cost example here for the home sale expenses, you'll see that the home sale expenses are slightly lower than they might have been on a domestic. The primary difference is the taxes because the IRS has rules that that have the tax filing, as Tricia had spoke earlier. But there are some costs in Canada that are not taxable. So some of the costs you'll see have varied slightly. I believe in the Canadian domestic, it was around 60,000, and that was just some of the differences. But you'll see that the tax will make up the difference on those costs as we go through. Let's see if I can advance to the home purchase. No, Laura, I'm sorry, you're going to need to advance for me. Thank you. On the home purchase side, you'll see that the costs are increased due to the closing costs in the US. So the closing costs on a purchase in Canada are much less than what they were or would be if you were moving into the US. But that is offset by some of the other costs that would be a little bit lower. So when we moved them to Toronto, to Ontario, there was a land transfer tax where there is no land transfer tax in Texas. So you'll see there's a slight difference in the cost, but again, the major cost on the home purchase side is the legal fees. The appraisal and the inspection are pretty similar between Canada and or cross-border into the US. Next slide, please. For other expenses, you'll see that it's quite similar, except for the shipment of goods, because as Lisa had been referring to, there are more restrictions crossing a border. There's additional reporting, there's Department of Transportation requirements, there could be delays at the border, there could be cost factors pertaining to driving time or transportation time and any delays due to weather, or if you had to, like now with COVID, put it into storage for a couple of weeks to meet the quarantine requirements, that would increase those costs. Again, the biggest chunk of the cost is the household goods shipment. And then the other costs that are in there, the next biggest is the if you provide subsidies, if the company provides a subsidy such as cost of living expenses or home sale, additional benefits to sell the home, etc. Those are the two biggest chunks of the fees. Additional fees that you would realize going across the border may be things like immigration fees if there's we have to apply for immigration or work permits to go into the US, or for a permanent resident green card application. Typically a green card application, it takes a couple of years, but the cost is around $8,000 to $10,000. So you'll see there's an immigration expense in there that was not factored for in a domestic move. Next slide, please. So this is the total cross-border cost you'll see is substantially higher than a domestic move. Most of the costs are considered taxable in the US. There are very few costs, or actually almost none, that are considered non-taxable in the US. So you'll see that there's a significant increase in the cost on the taxation side, because the tax gross up is much higher when you're moving someone into the US. So this has pretty much doubled from the domestic example that I had provided you, which factored for approximately $30,000. When going into the US, you're actually looking at closer to $70,000 based on US taxation. So there's almost $50,000 difference there. But one thing to consider when going across the border is, what if this is not a one-way move? What if we're looking at an assignment and the company is just sending them there for a defined period of time, say 1 to 3 years, and then the intent will be that they will return upon completion of that assignment? Then we need to look at some assignment costs. Next slide, please. So assignment costs have additional considerations that need to be factored into the costing. So if you're not moving someone there permanently, you may not be looking at a permanent green card process, but you would still need a work permit or a temporary visa or temporary foreign work permissions. And you would also be looking at renewals. So depending on the type of visa they would be eligible for, you might have a one-time application that would cover the whole period of the assignment, or you may be looking at annual renewals. So that would be a cost consideration that you'd have to look at. What is the qualification of that employee, and what is that going to impact on the costing for the company? Pre-departure expenses that would be considered in an assignment that would not be considered in a domestic permanent transfer would be things like financial tax assistance or tax consultation on what is that impact going to be due to dual tax reporting requirements. And ongoing tax preparation and filing if the company is looking at the fact that they need to cover tax filing in both Canada and the US. While they're reporting in the US, they will be subject to worldwide US income, and so therefore they will have to do tax reporting in both countries. The assignment letter would also need to be considered because it needs to have factors in there for the potential extension to the assignment, or if that assignment is terminated early, and what would that look like? Consideration for annual home leaves. Are we going to send them home once a year, which is typical within the companies that have employees on assignment? They would want them to come home to reconnect with their family, reconnect with the workplace, just have that connection to be able to come home once a year, check on their home, etc. Property management would typically, when you send someone on an assignment, you would not have them sell their house, and you would have them maintain that house because they do expect to come back. And when they return, they want to have their house, available for them. So we would want to make sure that you provide coverage to have someone cut the grass and someone check the house for insurance purposes on a regular basis. So many companies provide what we call a property management or property maintenance allowance. Spousal and family support. What if the spouse can't work in the new location because they don't qualify for dependent work assistance? Then we would need to look at, would the company provide any spousal or family support while they're on assignment? And then you're looking at the cost to bring them home once that assignment ends. So next slide, please, Laura. So when you're looking at a cross-border 3-year assignment, you will see that the costs increase substantially. So we're talking almost triple the cost when it comes right down to it. So that factors into the ongoing tax gross up that would apply over the 3 years. You would also be looking at not just the outbound costs, but the repatriation home costs and some of those ongoing recurring costs, such as the annual home leave, the property management, the accommodations in the location, because if they're maintaining their home at their home location, in this case Calgary, who is paying for the accommodations at the destination or the assignment location? That would typically be the company, and you'll see that factors for a big portion of the cost there, because that would typically be a company cost. Some of the other costs that you would need to consider would be, double shipment. You're shipping some of their goods there, and then you're going to be shipping their goods back at when they return, and then the visa and immigration costs, etc. So you do see that it is a substantial increase to costs for an assignment versus a one-way move. Next slide, Laura. And now we come to the poll question for this section. The poll question for this section is, what are some special considerations you should consider when sending an employee on an assignment? Would it be 1, immigration, 2, taxation, 3, repatriation, or 4, all of the above?
Okay. Oh, Get them coming in fast on this one too. Everybody's on the ball today. All right. I think we've settled on this one, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I think we've got some consensus here. Here we go. Let's see what we got. All right.
Look at that, 100% correct. That's wonderful. Yes, it's true. All of these would apply when it's an assignment based. So now I'll turn it over to Steve and he can do the closeout. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. As in previous sessions, you've certainly covered all aspects about the complexities of cross-border. I would just remind folks we've got a few minutes left for questions. If you'd like to learn more, and I know I always do, the 11-step process. If you'd like to know more about that or anything else that's been presented this afternoon, I'd encourage you to just pop us a note there in the chat box. We'll do our very best to respond. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. Are we seeing, one of the first questions is, are we seeing a movement more towards the BVO today than guaranteed offers? We spoke a little bit about that last week, and so maybe we can just cover that again this week.
Hi there, this is Lisa. Certainly quite a few of our clients who are doing US moves, they may offer a guarantee home sale plan in Canada, but their preference is to do a BVO program in the US. However, there are some, it's a smaller percentage for us, that do guarantee home sale in both Canada and the United States. Cindy, maybe you can talk about what Suncor's doing.
Yeah, we would do it for both. There would be some challenges if they were going from Canada to the US. We would ask that they try to have the home sold prior to leaving, otherwise they could draw additional tax, because when you go to the US, you are subject to worldwide taxation, and therefore any profits or gains realized as a result of your relocation would then become taxable. So if you sell your home after you've already relocated to the US, you would be subject to US taxation. So in some cases like that, if they have not sold their home prior to going to the US, we would certainly look at trying to apply the BVO in that situation, just to avoid some of that taxation and cover all the costs. So it is specific to the situation, but we do offer a guarantee program in both the US and Canada and on cross-border permanent moves.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Steve,
Sorry, Tricia.
That's okay, no worries. I'll just add to that. According to our 2019 survey, the percent of organizations offering home sale disposal assistance in the permanent relocation cross borders is holding strong, actually, compared to previous years. In 2019, 71% of the participants did confirm that they were offering some kind of assistance, compared to 65% in 2017. And specific to the guarantee sale itself, in 2019, 44% of organizations that responded indicated they did support it, compared to 50% in 2017. And most did direct reimbursement at 56% versus only in 2017, only 39%.
Great, great. So there's a number of things to consider there when making the choice between the two programs. So another question that's just come in is knowing spousal career challenges are the reason number 2 to decline a cross-border move. What have RMCs in place to address this specific concern? Not sure it's RMCs, but really it's really about the policies and the supports that companies have in place for that. Lisa?
Yeah, and Tricia, by the way, and Cindy, everyone can jump in here. Typically, and you're right, Steve, everything starts with the policy, and a company should or will have a provision in there that allows for funds to be given to the spouse partner for assistance in preparing their resume, interview skills, that sort of thing. The other realities of cross-border are also, there's these immigration challenges and whether or not the spouse partner can work. So some policies or some companies will also pay for, the immigration piece as well, trying to see if a spouse can get their documentation. Anything else there, Tricia or Cindy?
In addition to supporting spouses in terms of trying to be able to get them to be able to work, organizations will also do things like support them should they decide to return to school to upgrade their education, and also partner them with volunteer organizations. Because a lot of the times volunteer organizations have a difficult time getting professional level volunteers to help them with specifics. And so sometimes those people that are able to take that time and do some volunteering are truly, a real blessing to some of those organizations when they provide their professional skills.
Yes, and then also from an assignment perspective, many times what we're finding is if it is a dual employment situation and the spouse doesn't feel they can give up their career to join their family on an assignment, sometimes we're seeing situations where the family will stay behind, and then companies look at consideration for additional home leave travel, for example, to send them home more often or to send the family down to see them. So there is some considerations from that perspective as well.
Great, and we did see in the 2019 policy survey, one of the questions that was asked was where companies see they will be putting more supports in place, and certainly it was around the spouse and partner assistance. And as was mentioned, the immigration costs can be a significant part of that, along with credentialing as well, licenses, etc., that can be quite costly for an individual. Lisa, great advice on the importance of professional moving services again, particularly with cross-border. That cannot be emphasized enough, the complexities of that. So thank you, and glad to see that pet shipments are on the rise. Looks like we're looking after our furry friends nicely.
And they're family members, and more people have pets, and it's like, you want me, you also want my dog or my cat or my cats and dogs. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm sure that when all of this is over, those furry friends will play a bigger role in some of the decisions that are being made around movement of folks and families. So I think. Sorry, Trish, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, with all this isolating in place, I'm sure there's lots of people that would love to see their spouse go on an assignment on their own right now.
Okay.
Oh, have you met Trey?
One thing I wanted to add, Steve, to your comment about the pets, is I did notice that CRA also has now referenced it in some of their allowable expenses. So previously pets were not considered, but that I think could be a deterrent for many families if they couldn't take their pets. And so now that is starting to be a consideration as pets are considered to be part of the family members.
I didn't know that. Well, that's a good piece of information to impart to people on the session this afternoon. The pet lobby must be alive and well. moving forward, trying to get the government to move on that. So that is good news. I wonder how many pets, dogs particularly, are fed up of being walked 10 times a day and can't wait for their owners to get back to work. All right, well, that is it. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you know that in Spain, they're actually renting dogs out for people because of the lockdown in Spain? They're not allowed to leave unless they have a pet to walk. So people are renting dogs to walk them so they can get out of their apartments.
That truly is that truly is amazing. I'm sure that people will be paying individuals to line up at stores for them very soon too, if this carries on. Well, thank you all for a great session and lots of useful information. And as I said, well covered all of the aspects about cross-border. Greatly appreciated it. Enjoyed the conversation. To our participants, I want to thank you for attending. I hope that you found the presentation and some of the additional information that we provided was of value to you in developing a more detailed understanding about the complexities of employee relocation. I'll just give another plug for the CERC designation program. As I mentioned, that starts May the 12th, and registrations are available online. If you go to the CERC website and click on the Education tab, it'll take you to the registration page. It really is a great program, and as we're working from home, this is a great opportunity for us to look at increasing our own personal, professional development. So thanks again for being with us. Laura, thanks for hosting us and doing the polling. Always a great pleasure to be with you. I am not able to move the slide either, Laura, so I'll let you get the Weichert logo up there as we say thanks. These are the links for the contact information rather for, whoops, let's just go back one, Laura, thanks. There's the contact information if you'd like to connect with Lisa, Cindy, or Tricia. If you have any additional questions or if you have anything else that you'd like to learn more about, pop us a note here at info@cerc.ca. And Laura, I'll ask you to, there we go. Thanks again to our sponsor. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week, April 29th. I wish you all a good day. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.